Okay, I'm assuming everyone can see the screen. So I'm just going to go ahead. I can't see the Zoom chat or anything, but that's fine.
Yeah,
okay,
that's it.
Cool. Right, so this is my talk about feature flags. If you recognize this opening slide, it's probably because you are a fan of the show which has escaped my mind at the moment. I don't actually, Big Bang Theory. I don't actually watch it, but I've been told by many people if I'm doing a talk on feature flags, I have to use this reference. So hopefully you get the reference, lost on me, but hopefully you appreciate it. Who am I? As Oliver introduced me, I'm Ian Jenkins. I work for a company called Box UK, who are a software agency based in Cardiff. We do a lot of stuff with PHP, predominantly Symphony, and more recently we've done some WordPress projects. That little string under my name is my sort of email address, my Twitter handle, and my website all wrapped up in one. So there you go, enjoy. Okay, so feature flags, often referred to by other names, such as toggles, flippers, switches, conditions. They're all the same thing. What exactly is a feature flag? So we've got a few definitions here. First of all, the Wikipedia article on feature flags or feature toggles describe them as a software development technique. They talk about software features being able to be tested before they're ready for release, and this idea of being able to enable or disable features at runtime. The definition on the right-hand side there is from featureflags.io, which is a sort of really good reference on feature flags. And they talk about feature flags in the context of reducing risk, being able to iterate quickly, and they introduce this concept of decoupling sort of feature rollout or deployment, releases from deployments. Then finally, there's a good article on the Martin Fowler website, as there is for pretty much everything in software, on feature toggles. And yeah, they also talk about being able to modify system behavior at runtime. And they also introduce this concept of usage categories, which I quite like. And then recently I did a blog post on the Box UK website about feature flags and came up with my own sort of definition based off these. So this is how I would define feature flags. So feature flags are a software development technique that allows us to control the release of features independent of code deployment. This allows us to iterate quicker, testing features before they are complete to reduce risk and increase flow. So hopefully I'll be able to give a bit more texture to this definition throughout this talk. So what exactly is a feature flag? Well, when its barest form, this is a valid feature flag. So as Oliver mentioned, I gave this talk at WordPress meetup a few weeks ago, which is why it's sort of slightly WordPress flavored, although it's pretty generic PHP, to be honest. So a simple sort of constant, which you can use in an if condition, totally counts as a feature flag. In this particular case, if you toggle the constant here to true, then you would get a picture of Matt Mullenweg. That is a completely valid feature flag. You can take it a little bit further, become a little bit more sophisticated if you want to. So in this scenario here, similar sort of setup, but we've added a bit of sort of dynamism here. So we're actually getting feature flags from the database. So that get option is a core WordPress function to get an option from the database. So actually checking now that this flag is turned on or off in the database. Same concept, just a little bit more sophisticated. And we'll come to talk a little bit later about various other flags and how you can set them up and configure them and all the rest of it. So as I mentioned, there was one of the definitions introduced these categories of flags or types of flags. So I'd just like to run through some of those because I think they're really interesting. So first of all, let's talk about experiment flags. Now this is your classic sort of A/B testing or multivariate testing. Using flags, you can sort of turn features on for a certain set of users versus another set of users. And then you can measure that to sort of compare and find out which feature or which type of feature performs better. Then you've got these sort of ops flags. So back in the day, there used to be a thing where your site could get like slash dotted. So if your site would feature on a website called Slashdot, more commonly now it's sort of Hacker News or Reddit. You'd often end up with like a white screen of death. So the idea of these ops flags or operation flags is it allows you to quickly turn off portions of a page. So if you have one particular section on your website which is really unperformant, and you do suddenly get a big herd of users, then you can sort of disable that. Similarly, if you want to sort of flip to a reduced version of your homepage when it comes under load, again, a sort of operations feature flag would be really useful there. Then there's this idea of permissioning flags. So you can turn on features for a certain subset of users. So for example, you may have some premium users, so maybe users who pay a bit more money, so they get some additional features that could be done behind a sort of permissioning flag. Or you could have sort of beta users, so you can roll out features to a subset of users who are beta testers and so on. In fact, GitHub do this. I'm sure we've all experimented with the new notifications panel on GitHub. When they first rolled this out, and in fact I think you can still do this, they allowed certain users to sort of enable or disable the beta. So yeah, it's a real neat way of sort of rolling out features slowly and sort of testing the waters before it's sort of fully live. Then the final one I'm going to talk about is this concept of release flags, which I think is the most interesting one. So with release flags, it allows you to sort of wrap in progress features in flags, so that you can deploy to live even with features that are still in progress. I think a lot of the big apps do this. If you look at the screenshot on the top right there, I think when you see a lot of these app updates, which is your sort of classic banal bug fixes and performance improvements, I think what they're actually doing there is probably pushing new features that are wrapped behind feature flags. So although you don't see any new features, it means that in the future when they actually do want to release these features, it's just going to be a case of toggling a flag. I know Monzo did that fairly recently with one of their features. I think it might be the redesign of the app. And it allows us to decouple deployment from release. So we can deploy often, even if features are not complete. And then a release would be just this idea of toggling a flag. And then what that leads us into is this concept of continuous delivery. So I just want to talk about that a little bit more. So obviously the first thing you're all thinking of in this picture is that they're not stood 2 meters apart. I gave this talk before the lockdown, so there you go. So let's talk about continuous delivery. So continuous delivery is all about deploying little and often. Now, historically, this was a bit of a problem. If you had multiple developers or multiple teams working on different features or different streams of work, then when it came to releasing, it was problematic. So some of the solutions that sort of evolved from that, one was sometimes you just have to wait. If multiple developers or multiple teams were working on features, you'd wait for all work to be finished before you actually did the deployment. Obviously, this is suboptimal. You have these waiting periods. The release would become heavy, bloated. You have this integration step, which can often lead to conflicts and bugs and things. So then another solution that popped up was this idea of release branches. So that basically meant that if team A had finished their work, they could deploy it within a release branch, whilst the other team could still carry on working in their sort of feature branch. It meant you didn't have to wait for them to finish as well. So the image on the right there is Git Flow, which is one example of this. I dug out this image earlier today to put into this talk, and because we've not been working with this sort of approach for a while, looking back on it, it kind of looks insane. Like this diagram now, I look at it, I'm like, that's bonkers. Although we still do kind of do this on some of our projects and things, but yeah, just on reflection, it looks a little mad and a little complex. And it can become messy, even with a sort of process such as this, which factors in things like hot fixes and all the rest of it. It does still become messy and not very nice to work with. So continuous delivery tries to solve some of these problems. Now, if you're looking to continuous delivery in much depth, it's not too long before you come across these two books. The one on the left, Phoenix Project, is really good. It's a novel, so it's like a story, which is quite nice to read. And then by the same people or subset of the same people is the DevOps Handbook. Both really good. If you're interested in continuous delivery, definitely recommend those two books. And they introduce what they call the 3 ways. So the first one is this, the principle of flow, which is the one we're going to be focusing on for the rest of this talk. And the principle of flow is about smooth delivery of software through the sort of pipeline. Then the second one is the principle of feedback. This is about having fast feedback from right to left. So fast feedback from testers to developers, fast feedback from the client and to testers and to developers, and then finally, obviously, fast feedback from the end users to developers. And then the third one is the principle of continual learning. So you kind of want to always be continually learning, boosting your knowledge to ensure that you have a tuned in team, knowing what you're building and how best to do it. But as I mentioned, the one we're most interested in here, especially on the topic of feature flags, is the principle of flow. So just a few concepts to get clear is this idea of lead time. So lead time is the time between a ticket that appears on your board and that being done. And there's a similar concept, which is cycle time, which is slightly different. So cycle time is from when a ticket is first started, so when it first becomes in progress to it being finished. Now, in order to increase our flow, we want to try and reduce both the lead and the cycle time. So you want to get code into production as often, as smoothly as possible. The reason we want to do that is because any work that's not in production is effectively in a queue. It's not adding value, and it requires handover. So every step through this sort of pipeline requires handover. So either from maybe a product owner to a developer, or a developer to a tester, and so on, requires handover, and that causes that causes delay, which we don't want, because again, anything that's not in production is not adding value. So bigger queues equals bigger deployments equals bigger risk, and with a bigger risk, you have a decreased confidence. So the answer is we want to be shipping. We want to be deploying often to increase this flow. As soon as you aren't deploying often, you end up with these queues of work. And again, if you read the books, it goes into way more details about all this, but they draw comparisons with factory floors, and any sort of build up on any workstation in a factory is really bad news, leads to really inefficient work and ultimately lost revenue. So there's definitely parallels there with software. So you kind of want to reduce these queues and get work onto production as quickly and smoothly as possible. As I mentioned before, the problem here is work in progress. If you've got multiple teams and you want to be deploying often, how do you handle work in progress? And of course, the answer is feature flags. So by wrapping work in progress in feature flags, it means we can deploy as often as we like, and features that aren't complete will just be configured off, so it's safe to do so. One important note here, which I've actually not included in my talk, but testing becomes really important here. So in order to have really good confidence and ensure that we can happily push in progress work, we need to have a good testing setup so that linting is done often, and also unit tests and functional tests and all the rest of it, so that we know that we can confidently push work and that it's been tested, and even though the feature is turned off, it's not going to cause any breakage anyway. Cool. So how do we use feature flags in PHP? So if you're using Symphony, I know I've used this bundle in the past, but this is a really nice bundle. What I really like about this is that it introduces this ideas of conditions, and they have a few built in, but you can also build custom ones. And I like it as well because a lot of it's just configuration. So this example is in YAML, but you can use XML or PHP or whatever you like. I've not used this one, but when I was looking earlier, I came across it and it looks really nice. It's a very similar concept. You configure it with YAML and stuff if you want to. What I like about this one is that it puts stuff into the profiler, so you can sort of see at a glance which flags are enabled and disabled and so on. If you're using Laravel, no, I've never used Laravel, but I was doing a bit of research earlier, and this one looks like a good candidate. So maybe check this out. What I like about this one is that it seems to have some nice features. So you can do some nice stuff in your blade views. Has some nice routing middleware. That seems like a really nice feature, which I've not seen in some of these other libraries. You can do some other stuff as well, but it looks really nice if you're using Laravel. If you're using WordPress, which I have been lately, then there's this library called Flagpole, which we use on one of our projects, which is quite nice. Gives you a nice GUI, so you can sort of turn flags on and off. Yeah, so these are some of the flags we use on one of the projects we've got going in work at the moment. And I've tried to label some of these up. So we talked about these categories of flags earlier. So you can sort of see at a glance that we've got some examples of operation flags here. So for example, sometimes we want to turn on extra debug logging if we're trying to nail down a problem, so we can do that. Then we've got some experiment flags. So we've got a few features which you want to experiment before fully publishing it. So what you can do here with the enable preview button is you can enable that just for your user. So if you want to experiment with some flags just for your logged in user, you can do that. We've got some examples of release flags as well. So for example, the promo banner one here, we wanted to be able to turn that on a sort of given point in time. So that was really nice to be able to do that. We don't have any examples of permissioning flags. I mentioned the enable preview allows you to do it for just your current user, but the library we're using doesn't really have any support for more clever things like being able to turn it on for users in a certain country or with a certain role or anything. And if you're not using any of the frameworks or anything I've just mentioned, Launch Darkly is this sort of big software as a service feature flag, all singing, all dancing solution. I've never used it, but it looks really nice. Nice thing about this is it gives you like analytics and stuff about your flags, which is really nice. It seems to be used by some of the big boys, and it's got neat integrations with pretty much every language and framework as you'd expect. So maybe check that out. Or just roll your own. As I mentioned, it could just be a simple if statement to start with, and you can build it up from there, something a bit more sophisticated. But yeah, I don't think it'd be too much effort to roll your own if you wanted to. Cool. So that's most of the talk done. Not quite finished, but mostly. What I was going to do, and I did this at the WordPress meetup as well, was actually do a live publishing of a feature flag. So I'm hoping you can still see my screen. So this is a live site of a project we're currently doing at Box UK, a website called OKDo. It's an e-commerce store selling electrical components like Raspberry Pis and things. This is the UK site, and you can see we have these sort of product category pills here. This is the Japan version, and we don't have them. And that's because on the Japanese side, they're feature flagged off. So I'm just going to enable this flag live and talk just to show you that this stuff actually works and it's really useful and really powerful. So this is the flag here, this enable level 2 subcategories in shop. And this is the Japanese site. So I'm going to publish that. Cool. I'm going to refresh the page. And there you go. We now have pills on the live Japanese OKDo website. So there you go. Yeah, so just to wrap up, I know the irony that Michael's talk was a lightning talk, and I'm probably being quicker than him, but there you go. And also at 8 PM, we've got the NHS clap thing. So if I can get done before 8 PM, that'd be really cool. Yeah, so feature flags are not too difficult to implement. You can start off really basic, like seriously, an if condition with a constant totally counts. There are multiple types of flags, which are really useful to know. They sort of add an extra dimension to feature flags and allow you to think about them in a slightly different way, which is really neat. Release flags are really useful because they allow us to make use of continuous delivery. Continuous delivery is awesome, helps to reduce risk. It changes your mindset. Like when you're developing software, it makes you think in a different way, which is really good. And it really reduces deployment pain, which is nice. There are loads of good libraries out there to get you going across all PHP frameworks and things. So hopefully that'll be useful. And yeah, we released during the talk, so that's a great idea because it worked. That's really cool. And then finally, I just added this in. So this was a short Slack conversation I had with a colleague about feature flags. So he was asking whether he should feature flag this one little feature he did. I wasn't sure because it was a bug fix, but I really like this line at the bottom he's got here. So he mentioned it gives him less anxiety when doing a live deploy, which I think just sums it up brilliantly. Like if you're releasing code which is behind a feature flag, you don't have to worry. Like I've been on projects in the past where features are going live and you're kind of nervous almost because real users are going to use this thing, could break and all the rest of it. With this, you don't, because you're pushing stuff up, and worst comes to worst, if it is published on live and starts breaking, you can just toggle the feature off and then you're good. So yeah, that's a really big point. So yeah, definitely get involved in feature flags. It'll reduce your anxiety. Cool, that's me. There's a link there to the blog post. Maybe I'll put it in the chat. I did recently on this topic. So if you've fallen asleep, that's fine. You can just go and catch it on the blog post. Cool.